Well, there is a commission that's called the Ferndale Community.
Oh, yeah.
That's
I was
right.
leaving, I'm like, this doesn't seem like their product.
What that group's doing.
That's what Michael did too.
I was like, I didn't
Yeah,
think that
didn't
they were.
expect that when I opened the first
Is this the Peretti?
chasing a new
It's coming up.
I know.
Chasing a new
It will
revenue
be
source.
spring
Yeah,
one
right.
day. All right, so let's come back to order. It is 9:09, and we have one additional public hearing this evening. We've got one additional public hearing this evening, and then I've got a request from an audience member for an update on an existing project, so I'll bring that up under administrative items. But our final public hearing is on residential ordinance amendments regarding porches, pools, projections, and fences, and amendments to the ordinance around those items. As we did with our earlier public hearing, we will take, we will have an introduction from our city staff. And then if someone would like to speak to this public hearing item, you can come up to the podium. You've got 3 minutes to state your name and your address and offer any comment that you would like.
Have a good one, Joseph.
That we will start with an introduction from our city staff on residential ordinance amendments.
Great. Hello again.
Hello.
So when I first wrote this staff report, I didn't think we'd have this many motions, but we covered a lot of ground. So there are 4 motions here that have multiple layers
That's like stuff all over.
for consolidation purposes. A lot of this conversation started February 7th. We had a brief discussion item just about a number of topics that all sort of relate to residential development and residential housing, and we have a new building official who works through SafeBuilt or is contracted through SafeBuilt, and he started in September, and so it's always good to have an outside source, coming from a different city looking at ordinances, and he saw some areas that have confusion, because he's dealing primarily with the single-family homes that come in for additions and new builds and things like that. So eliminating confusion. Also, the BZA had seen a few instances over the past couple of years of maybe some ordinances that are preventing additions we may want. And then throughout the master plan process, we talked a lot about, we want to encourage people to preserve their homes and continue to live in homes. And we know the, price of housing is going up everywhere, not just Ferndale. But if we can encourage people to some flexibility in, doing some of these home additions, that might get them to be able to stick around and be long-time residents. So I'll go through each of these. I did not receive any letters, emails, phone calls about any of these for the public hearing notice, but a lot of this came from conversations with the building official, BZA, and then applicants that we frankly had told, if you were to go to the BZA, it's going to be pretty hard to show a hardship, but we're working on some things. So, projections in front yards, initially that was looked at just really to clean up. There's a separate line that calls out bay windows, chimneys, and eaves, and it's different than the architectural feature allowances that are in a table, and so we would recommend consolidating and then also allowing the addition of window wells to that chart, because those are not explicitly mentioned, but they're proposed quite often in the city, and so it's a little bit unclear. Much of the conversation really, I think internally we've been talking quite a bit about front porches. Right now, I think as a city as a whole, we like to encourage front porches that, kind of encourages interaction with neighbors, things like that, throughout our residential districts. And so right now, front porches are counted in lot coverage. So that can, in some of our limited lot sizes, prevent people from doing that. So staff recommends moving forward with removing front porches from lot coverage to allow for more front porches on the smaller lots where that may prevent a front porch from being added because they'd be over lot coverage. Front porches also came up when we were looking at front setbacks. So we know that the requirement for in R1 districts is 25 feet for a front setback. We also know that that's pretty much never going to happen because there is a footnote A in the section that requires designers and architects to look at blocks where everything's been previously built, which is pretty much everywhere in the city. and using the average depth of the front yards of the 5 adjacent lots in the zoning district, in either zoning district, plus or minus 3 feet, and then eliminating the greatest and least distances. I'm glad our building official looks at that more than I do, because that is confusing and complicated. But so we would recommend that in that area, we would replace porch or deck with attached garage or enclosed front porch. So instead of penalizing people for having any type of deck, you know, a front porch that is open air isn't really habitable space. So changing that language, you know, doesn't really penalize people that want to have front porches. But if you do enclose it, that is like an extra room, and that should probably count for the setback. Not necessarily a penalty, but just in keeping with the rest of the district.
Counted mine, so that's fine with me.
And then connected to that, so projections into required yards, that same chart with the bay windows and architectural features would also be proposed to be amended to allow for a maximum of 5 feet in the front yard. So we don't necessarily want people right on the sidewalk, because we know that there's probably visibility issues with people backing up. But we as staff had just thought 5 feet maybe was the maximum for that, but that's certainly open for discussion, as all of this is. We also have run into some issues where single-family homes have been submitted, their plans have been submitted, where it's kind of confusing. In the R1, section 2443, that chart, it lists impervious surface in the schedule regulations, and it's just dashes. So people assume that they don't need to provide any open space, which, you know, we always correct them, but it has led to some frustrating phone calls from there. So we're recommending that the chart be updated to just say open space there, so it's in one section, so it's not listed elsewhere. So we would recommend that change, as well as ensuring that a footnote also includes single-family dwellings. In that footnote, because we did allow single-family dwellings to be in R3 districts, and so that's not 100% clear, but this would kind of clarify that. Regarding fences, we talked a lot about this, I think, in February, but fences, they're not permitted to extend toward the street beyond the front building setback. We don't want to change that, but those fences are limited to 4 feet. We've had numerous conversations with residents on that 6 feet is more appropriate because of protecting children in the backyard, pets, things like that. I think my dog could probably leap over 4 feet, but she's kind of a super dog. But so we recommend increasing that maximum fence height with 6 feet. I think at the conversation last meeting had talked about, you know, what about corner lots? And so the way that the corner lot line ordinance is written in the definitions essentially delineates the front yard from the side yard with a line, a lot line that it also has to do with the address, where if you're on Albany Street on the corner of Allen, if your address is Allen, then that would be your front yard. That's probably a bad example, thinking of what Allen looks like, but it's where your address is what is considered in that perspective. Continuing on in the additions and residential homes theme, residential dwellings have the 5-foot side yard setback. We recently updated this for accessory buildings, structures and uses. There's been a lot of requests for expansions that are, you know, maybe closer than the 5-foot setback, but the building code does allow for 3 feet with fire-rated construction, and so staff's proposing allowing second floor additions only on existing footprints. That could be this 3-foot setback and would not be closer than the property line of the existing home. So this would allow the addition, but you couldn't just add on to the lower level to meet this, 3-foot, to have this 3-foot benefit. And then lastly, swimming pools. This was kind of an interesting one, and you know, I don't really, I think someone asked what's the accurate number of pools in the city. I don't have that, unfortunately, but I do know that if, considering the lot widths in the city,
How do you not have that? Justin,
you know,
shocking.
VSNA, it's helpful in many reasons, but I don't think the historical information's that great. I can say that there's 4 permits for swimming pools in the queue right now, but they would have trouble meeting the existing ordinance right now, which requires 25 feet from another accessory structure. So we're simply just, we don't think that that was the intent of the ordinance to limit swimming pools, but we are proposing that pools be exempt from that 20-foot requirement, but pools should be no less than 3 feet from the other accessory building, so there's still some gap there.
So can I have my second story addition 5 feet from the neighbor's house over the pool?
Yes.
Your RV next
As long as it's not 25 feet from the shed.
My question is whether a pool is impermeable surface.
Yeah, that's
Actually.
that's the question I had.
Yeah.
That is a good question, and
Brett and I had the same question.
I can look at that while we're continuing. I believe that counts as lot coverage.
It should.
Yeah. So
Yeah, okay.
I believe that it is.
All right.
Unless it's a natural pond pool.
Right.
Inflatable.
A sustainability feature,
Of
maybe?
sorts.
Right.
But
Bioswale. Usually happens to us after 9 p.m.
Right.
Thank you, Justin.
No problem.
I don't want to get too carried away. We do need to open a public hearing. Was there anything else in terms of introduction? Sorry, we got.
I don't think so.
Alrighty, then I will open the public hearing at 9:20 p.m. Gavel. Yeah. If we have anyone here to speak to the proposed text amendments to fences, pools, residential setbacks, the items that Justin introduced, you're welcome to come to the podium, state your name and address for the record. You've got 3 minutes to address the Planning Commission on any of these residential district amendments that are proposed. Welcome back.
Hi. Could you just repeat the fence proposal again? Or
So fences right now, if you were to build one along the front of your house, that front fence would have to be 4 feet tall.
Okay.
Where everywhere else it could be up to 6 feet. As a residential fence, only residential, not commercial. And so now we're proposing that you could have 6 feet instead of 4 feet.
Okay. Yep. That's fine. And then just speaking to the permit process, I know it's not on here really quickly, but I find it to be painstakingly slow. I was going to build a deck last year. I called in maybe May, June, and they said it would take up to 2 months for them to come out and even check out the process. Then I applied for a fire permit this year 3 weeks ago, and I called, and there was just zero record of me ever calling or submitting application. And someone who was able to come out the day of, and I just thought that was a little bit kind of ridiculous. So if we could just potentially work on the speed of permits, and again, it's already stressful enough to try and get a project like a deck or a fence completed, let alone having to wait 2 to 3 months or 3 to 4 weeks to get a fire permit or a deck permit accepted. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Any other comments for the public hearing? We will close the public hearing at 9:22. Justin, do we still have a fire pit permit? I thought y'all got rid of that, Dan.
No.
No?
We still have it.
Okay,
We do.
never mind.
Yeah.
And
I'm not in council anymore. I
I'll
don't know.
definitely take your name and information for sure and connect you
Thank
with our building official. I would say it's a bummer that took that long. I would say that at last May, I believe that was probably the timeline. It was.
You were without building officials last year.
Yes.
Yes.
So now we have a true building official, and we have plan review in-house and also through Safe Built. And I would say that really we've been turning things around in 2 to 3 weeks now, but really that's been more of like a October development. So I mean, I believe it was probably 2 months, which is, not exactly business or residents or business or customer service friendly. So.
You don't need a garage sale permit anymore, but if you want to burn it.
You do need for fire pit. All right. Someone burn my couch. Okay. Thank you, though, for sharing. And we often, I shouldn't say often, but we occasionally do get comments at public comments, that are outside of the purview of the Planning Commission, but we can always refer them, often even to someone in the room. So thanks, Mike. So, do we want to go in order? or does anyone, I only have two questions. Does anyone just want to jump in? Their first question sounds like Brent and I have a similar one about pools and lot coverage.
Go ahead.
Justin, you think that pools, and I'm not talking about the inflatable ones, but that pools are part of your impervious surface?
I do.
Okay.
I will double check, but
I know one house in particular that has the world's largest in-ground pool, and it takes up their whole backyard. But that said, that's a pre-existing issue. So I guess I'm comfortable. I don't know why that spacing was put in the first place. I'm comfortable with the changes you've proposed as long as any type of permanent or semi-permanent structure, like an above-ground or an in-ground pool that has some sort of structure to it,
Sure.
is considered impervious surface.
yeah, I just want to double check, but
Okay.
I believe that somewhere in here it does say must comply with the zoning requirements for that district, which would fall under that, just like garages or sheds.
The other question is on the front porches and setbacks, and I just want to make sure that I understand, and I'll flip to the page in the ordinance too, but talk to me again about the maximum 5 feet projection into the front yard.
Sure. And maybe it might be helpful if I bring up an example. So,
Okay.
Academy Street between Woodward and Paxton. That was one recently where we had to look at the average depths and all of that. So the average front yard setback, which is inclusive of the porch, was 16.5 feet. So that gave the designer plus or minus 3 feet. I think in that instance they chose 3 feet. They took the benefit of it, so 13.5 feet was where the front of the
Porch, not the approach.
porch would be. So in this instance, they would. Just want to make sure I'm reading this correctly. So then the front porch would be allowed to project, but it would not be able to be any closer than 5 feet from the property line.
The porch or the approach to the porch? Like the
The-
step.
The steps would be inclusive of that.
I think maybe it's just the staff recommends the projections into required yards be amended to have a maximum of 5 feet into the front yard. Maybe what's throwing me is that I get it, but I would have stated it as maximum of 5 feet from the front lot line, as opposed to into the front yard. And that's, I think, where the question, I think it's page 9 of our PDF. Yep, permitted projections into required yards. The changes, it doesn't state whether these are maximums or minimums.
I think my page numbers are different, but
Sorry, yeah, it's the 9th page of the PDF. So it's section 24193, projections into yards, where there are a couple things that have been changed, including this thing about the 5 feet,
Right.
unroofed porches, stoop stairways, and steps, 5 feet. The minimum, maximum, I guess, isn't as clear to me as what you just said, which is the porch with its steps cannot be more than 5 feet
5 feet.
from the lot line.
Right.
More than 5 feet from the lot line?
Less than. No.
Yes. It would have to be.
Why can't I get this out right?
Sorry, I should have
this
put
is-
less than in there.
This is the one thing that's confusing me is I get it. You want 5 feet from the lot line to the steps.
Right.
Minimum, a minimum.
Minimum.
Yes.
Yes.
Or more. 5 feet or more. I'm just having trouble.
Yeah, I read this as you can have steps that go 5 feet into your front yard. That's how I read it.
Yeah.
And I do have a
I
maximum.
get where we're going, but I'm having trouble both in the written description and in the chart. It just wasn't coming through to me as lot line, 5 feet or more, steps, porch.
So
It
when that
was coming through to me as house, 5 feet.
No closer than 5 feet to the front lot line.
no closer is what I was going for, and I can see how this is confusing. But no closer than 5 feet is what I was going for.
Commissioner Goring, did you have something on this one as well, or a verbiage suggestion?
No, I just still read that as the way if it's a permitted projection into a required yard, that projection would be coming off of the structure, and so if it's from the house into the front yard, it can go 5 feet into the yard.
Which means my porch can only be 5 feet in depth.
An uncovered porch that projects beyond into the yard.
Right.
Yeah.
Roof porches, steep stairs and steps.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
Does that include the steps?
It doesn't include this stuff.
It does.
So you want both, actually. You want unroofed porches, steep stairways and steps to not come more than 5 feet from the house, but you also don't want them to be closer than 5 feet from the lot line. Is that what you just described?
I don't want them to project more than 5 feet into the
Yard?
front yard.
From the house.
From the house, yes.
And then
So you can't have a 10-foot
Stairways.
porch in the front of your house.
So I guess in the example of that Academy Street, right? So let's say that they chose 16, it was 16.5 was the average, they chose 13.5. They would only be allowed to have 8.5, would be the closest that the porch could be. Because that is a 5-foot projection into the front yard. Does that make sense?
Including the steps.
Right, including the steps. Yes.
So you have a 5-foot porch plus the steps at a maximum of 8 whatever feet, and then you'd still have 5 feet to
Right.
the lot line.
Right.
Okay, that's not what I heard, though.
Yeah, I just heard you give it.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
not what I heard, though. I heard that the porch plus the steps needs to be no more than 5 feet.
Into the, no more than 5 feet into the yard.
Right, it's steps and porch.
Right.
So if my steps go up 2 feet, my porch can only be 3 feet.
Well, steps should, the way I intended to write it was that steps
This one's
would be
always
part,
tricky.
would be part of the uncovered porch.
Yeah. It's
Right.
a killing porch city.
This
What's
one's
that?
always tricky.
Yeah.
Killing porch city.
Oh, the front porch fest or whatever?
Yeah.
Well,
Why only 5 feet of porch? What if I want a 7-foot?
well,
Then it has to be,
It's, from what it sounds like, you can only build a 5-foot porch.
That's right. That's what this says.
That's what it says.
if you're projecting past the allowed setback.
That's not how that
That's not what that says.
reads to me.
That reads past the house.
Right, just, you're only allowed to go out 5 feet from the house, no matter where it's at.
Period.
All
I
it
gue-
says
I guess
is
what I'm-
permitted projections into required yards. So the required yard is 13,
right,
and the permitted projection is 5 feet.
right.
So if if the required yard was way further back, you could have a bigger porch.
Right. I guess I'm not trying to limit the size of
This
porches.
one's always tricky.
I know.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was not trying to limit the size of porches. I was just trying to limit them
Sideways
being
porch.
right
Sign on this.
next to the sidewalk is what the intent was. But
Seriously, this is why my porch is sideways, because me and Derek and I've just forgotten our former building official's name, couldn't decide on this.
yeah,
So, for clarification, this used to be 0? Is that what it used
It
to be?
says here,
yeah.
Okay, so it's actually increasing the size of porches. We're not, this has nothing to do with a covered porch. A covered porch is, that's not actually in discussion. This is for an uncovered porch or a stoop.
Right.
so whether it's covered or enclosed, that's not this.
Right.
The covered
Not only if it was enclosed, not just if it's just covered.
enclosed makes it part of
Right.
the lot
Building.
coverage, and the enclosed would have to be part of that, like 13 and a half.
Your front setback.
Yeah.
Or your
feet in
front-
that example.
If it's, only if it's enclosed
Right.
completely.
Then it's like habitable space.
Or what if I wanted to
Do
put
what
a
makes
medical
more
marijuana
porches.
facility? I want a covered porch 5 feet from the center.
Only if it's a grow operation.
I guess I'd say do what makes more porches, and that's where I just
Right.
tied myself in knots trying to reconcile what I was looking at in the chart with what I was reading in the text, and
Yeah. Well, I
whatever,
can't see.
whatever makes more porches.
Right, can't just say porches can't be any closer than 5 feet from the sidewalk.
But I think that's not what you were intending. That's how I read it, but that's not what you intended.
I mean, I'm not trying to limit the size. I'm just trying to keep. It seemed like when we talked in February that we didn't want them right on
Right.
the sidewalk just because of visibility.
Right,
Agreed.
right.
Right.
I think in my yard, I've got a good
Totally
10
agree.
feet from the porch to the sidewalk.
Right.
Which means you can see when you're pulling out of your driveway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Mine as well. So if it is unclear, we can relook at that one, certainly. We wrote the medical marijuana one first, is all I can say.
Through the chair, is there a way to create a simple graphic so that everybody interprets it the same way?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
That would, I'm very visual. That would help me too.
Yes.
Okay.
That's what we're trying to do with the sign ordinance as well.
Okay.
But that makes sense.
In that case, are we comfortable making a motion about potential projections, or do you want to see it back here?
I think if we put a finding in, or a condition in that we clean up the language to be descriptive, and we can all have the same conceptual idea of what this is,
Add
I
information.
think we're fine. Just put a condition on it.
And that the intent is to promote porches
Yes.
and not reduce porches.
Yep.
Any questions or discussion on any of the other items? I think we have 6 or 7 here. Is that right? Councilman Martin, any other?
No,
Commissioner Goring?
I feel like we waived it on this one.
Commissioner Farr?
Nothing.
Casio? Brazen, Nazar?
Start making motions.
My only ones were pools and fences. Not fences. Pools and fences. Pools and
Porches.
pools and porches.
Look, I did the lead motion, somebody take this.
I'll do this. I move that the planning commission recommend approval of the amendment, I'm just gonna go straight down the list here, of the amendment to Article 3 residential districts. The city council has summarized below with the following findings as listed in the packet.
Support.
Thank you. That is a motion from Commissioner Farr with a second from Commissioner Brazen. Any discussion on that motion? All right, a roll call vote, please.
Okay. Commissioners Goering,
Yes.
Azar,
Yes.
Martin.
Yes.
Brazen,
Yes.
Farr,
Yes.
Casio,
Yes.
Baker.
Yes, that motion passes.
Through the chair, just for the upcoming motions, I just noticed that the bullets continued on, so
Yeah.
findings, it should be A, B, and the fences, not.
Not CD.
Yes.
Thank you. Whoever would like to make the motion can make
Was
that
there any
motion.
additions to fences?
No, I think
Nope.
the
All right.
additions is in projections.
I move the planning commission recommend approval of the amendment to fences, section 24-189, section 3, article 9, general provisions. The city council has summarized below with the following findings, just relettered as A and B.
Second.
Thank you. That was a motion by Commissioner Farr with a second by Commissioner Azar.
You know, I
Is
have
there
a
any
point of
discussion
clarification on this
Please,
one.
thank you.
Yeah, for finding A, the second sentence where it says fences in excess of 6 feet shall not be constructed, is that even needed anymore? I know that was changed from 4 to 6, but now it's not. It's a non-issue because we're just saying. I think we just should just delete that point.
But
So-
then, do we lose
It's
all
a-
restriction?
Same thing.
Could you build an 8-foot fence then?
I think we already don't we have it specified that fences are 6 feet or no?
No.
I
I
thought.
think that's what this,
Yeah, that's what we're doing there.
before it was 4, so now this is what's making it 6.
So what height can fences be?
6.
That's
6.
the only height. They can't go over 6 feet.
Correct.
Smaller.
They can go smaller, so we don't need to have that second sentence. Because a fence can't be in excess of 6 feet.
Well, that's what's keeping the front,
That's
because
what's creating the 6 feet.
the side and back's already regulated to 6. And
Right.
the front was regulated to 4, so now we're regulated.
Right. No, we don't even have to have it regulated. We can just delete it.
But nowhere else in though does it say 6 feet.
For front yard fences.
Right.
That's what it's doing.
I thought it just said fences may be 6 feet. I'll go back to it, but
Verse 24, 189.
through the chair
I
previously.
mean, it's just for cleaning it up, but it just seems like it's unnecessary.
If they can only be 6 feet.
Here we go, 24-189. Fences of not more than 6 feet in height may be constructed in residential
Okay.
districts with a minimum of rear side.
Because it does say rear yard before. Okay.
Are we good as proposed? Commissioner Goring, or do you still want to strike the last sentence, the second sentence? In the proposed motion, do you still want to strike the second sentence, or are you good with the proposed language?
I'm okay with it as it's proposed.
Okay, thank you. Already, any other discussion on motion, fences? All right, we'll have a roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Cesar,
Yes.
Martin,
Yes.
Brazen,
Yes.
Farr,
Yes.
Casio,
Yes.
Gurink,
Yes.
Baker.
Yes, that motion passes. There's a final motion here on projections into yards. Oh, geez.
Not so fast.
Right.
Seriously, Baker.
Oops. Never mind.
There's no motion on the table yet.
All right, so I'm going to try this one.
Okay.
I move the Planning Commission recommend approval of the amendment to projections into yards, section 24-193, Article 9, general provisions. City Council is summarized below with the findings as follows. A, Planning Commission held a public hearing April 18, 2018 to consider the zoning text amendment to the projections into yards ordinance detailed in the attached draft. Section A, as stated in the packet. Section B, as stated in the packet. Section C, to clearly identify projections into the front yard through a demonstrative aid, such that it doesn't limit porches and in any fashion, but it doesn't encroach upon the sidewalk in the limiting fashion as staff has recommended. And B, the proposed zoning text amendments are consistent with the goals and objectives of the Ferndale master plans.
Support.
Thank you. That's a motion from Commissioner Farr, a second from Commissioner Brazen. Was that clear, City Clerk?
I believe it was.
Sorry.
Sorry you were
Not
clear.
you. I usually write down things and circle and hand them to her. We added this in. Any discussion on the motion? Did that represent your comment, Commissioner Czar?
Yes.
Other discussion on the motion? All right. We shall have a roll call vote, please.
Okay. Commissioners Martin,
Yes.
Brazen,
Yes.
Farr,
Yes.
Casio,
Yes.
Gurink,
Yes.
Azar,
Yes.
and Baker.
Yes, that motion passes.
All right, I move the Planning Commission recommend approval of amendment to accessory building structures and uses, section 24-183-1E, Article 9, general provisions. The City Council is summarized below with the following findings as represented in the packet, findings being A and B instead of G and H.
Support.
Thank you. That is a motion by Commissioner Farr, a second by Councilman Martin. Is there any discussion on this motion? We'll have a roll call vote then.
Brazen,
Yes.
not Williamson. Farr,
Yes.
where am I here? Casio,
Yes.
Gurink,
Yes.
Azar,
Yes.
C. Martin,
Yes.
and Baker.
Yes, thank you. That motion passes. City Clerk, did I close the public hearing? I think I did. Thank you.
Yes.
All right, our next item is administrative items. We have one member of the audience left who missed call to audience at the beginning, and he had a question about Harding Park. So actually, Justin, I told him that I'd be happy to take his question, and that maybe there's a quick update you can give us on Harding.
Yeah,
So,
thank you guys.
yeah.
So I live at 3140 Inman. I'm on the west side of Harding Park. And in my backyard and then the surrounding houses are about 5 to 6 of us. It's not severe flooding, but there is consistent water accumulation after a rain, and then for, I would say, probably throughout the summer, it never really goes away.
In the park?
Yeah, and it's between the newly formed sidewalk and fences of the houses. It extends out about 20 to 30 feet from the fence line of the house, and again, it spreads out throughout about 5 houses. I haven't really inspected the rest of the park or anything like that, but it's kind of intermittent throughout that west side. So I'm just kind of putting it out there and wondering if there's any solutions to the problem, whether or not I myself could get some dirt and sod and, send a bill to the city or something like that. Again, I'm a pretty handy man, so I could definitely take care of that myself. But my other option was just a little bridge extension from your fence out to the sidewalk of a biodegradable like mulch or something like that that can be removed at some point. So I'm also open to any other suggestions. So thank you.
Thank you. I know this has been a challenge at Martin Road Park as well, and there's obviously sort of a huge, big process that's happening in Martin Road Park. But at Harding, there's sort of a smaller infrastructure thing that happened with some berms and some sidewalks. And I don't know if you've got anything to add or if you can help refer this to DPW and to Parks and Rec, but we certainly don't want standing water and mosquitoes, and that's what we were all just talking about with Martin Road Park.
Right,
so.
definitely not.
Yeah.
It's a new issue to me, but not surprising, really. I think that there's a lot more flooding in general on east
side of town.
east of the railroad tracks,
Yeah.
right? So, have you spoken with DPW or Parks or anybody yet? No. Okay. Yeah. I'll give you a business card, and I have your info too. But I'm happy to relay that information to DPW and Parks staff, and I mean we have a sustainability planner who also is thinking of things like that. So that's something I think that could be addressed through probably grading, really.
Right.
But happy to relay that info too. And then I don't know if you're familiar with SeeClick Fix. Obviously, I will share this information, but SeeClick
Fix
is a new city app. I'll send you the link to it. But it's any issue that's city related, you can report it through pictures and sharing pictures and things like that. And Joe should be here explaining this much better than me. But essentially, you can track your request throughout the process and get feedback on it. And so I'll send an email to the team, but also put it in SeeClick Fix myself, and then we can route it. And then you'll get updates, as many as you want, I guess.
Thank you.
Can you have Joe or whomever just follow up with us with an email when it's resolved?
Absolutely.
I had just something real quick for administrative items, and Justin and Jordan already know this, but it's funny having been an elected official where I had a lot of one-on-one conversations with people about particular issues that were important to them versus being an appointed official where I try to keep conversations sort of to the whole body. Like I don't want to have a ton more information than everyone else does. I just want to let you know that I've been trading emails with Janet Narich, who's been one of our, trading voicemails, who's been one of our commenters and questioners about the Pinecrest site. And Janet has a lot of very specific questions about DEQ supervision and remediation, that sort of stuff that she's working on with Jordan. But one of her overarching questions that I've asked for some feedback from Justin and Jordan on is what the Planning Commission's purview is around environmental issues on a site, and what we should be reviewing or thinking about. Obviously, there's a whole brownfield review process, but this is the most contaminated site, at least that I've worked with in like 12 years. So Justin and Jordan agreed that should and could be part of our information gathering process, and that there is some information about site contamination that is over at the library. I know Janet's already read through it. I think a couple other neighbors are. They have it electronically, and I asked Jordan and Justin to just forward it to all of us so that we could all take a look at the report. It's eventually going to go on the website too, but I just wanted to mention it, that it was something that was brought up to me directly by a resident, so I just asked that the information be shared with the whole commission so that we all had it. So that's my only administrative update.
Yeah. And we've actually been, I think it's kind of been an ongoing process on what is the best way to connect and communicate with residents and business owners about all of the big projects going on.
I think you just keep getting better, frankly. So.
Well, good, thank you.
Yeah.
But we
really.
We've also had a partnership with the U of M's Citizen Interactive Design program, and their project, my group's project specifically this summer, was on how to better just send out that information, not just through website, but also through some more, some better mailings that are easier for us to send, and also provide the legal information we have to provide, but also kind of share it in a way that it's more accessible. So their semester's almost done, so we'll be sharing that with you and sending you a website link of what that looks like. It's kind of in a beta phase, so we really want your feedback because you guys are all involved in these projects. So that site is kind of the template. That Pinecrest site is the template for how we're going forward. So great.
Thank you. All right, any other updates this evening?
No, I appreciate all the thoughtful feedback around medical marijuana and, I mean, everything you guys are doing. I know we're meeting twice a month and asking a lot out of folks, and but I think hopefully you're all feeling like you're making an impact, but we appreciate the attention to detail. So
Thank you. Likewise, you guys are putting in a ton of work in between these meetings. I know you're really sprinting right now, so thank you.
thanks.
All right, I think we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.